Here on the screen we have the first item, and I'll just go down. I am an architect. An archaeologist. Sometimes I do build things when I'm digging holes. Self-taught, of course, and to find and research bottles used by earlier settlers of South Australia, and particularly the Gawler area. I find that that's archaeology to me, finding the history of Gawler. Then we go on to a sociologist. Well, it's a study of man's habits, social and eating. In the Gawler area, I've found a lot of oil and complement bottles, and I guess this is through the earlier settlers didn't have fridges, and they hung their meat under the shade of a tree or in a tent because there wasn't a lot of buildings and cellars around in the early days, and by the middle of the week the meat had started to have a little bit of a bad taste, so they'd pour in a bottle of oil. By the fifth day it may have a bit of a colour, so they'd pour in a little bit of oil and a bottle of complement, and by the end of the week it might be green, so they put everything they had in the house into it so they could eat it. And then in my digging I found lots and lots of oyster shells. In one place I reckon there was a whole dray load dumped over a bank, and after about 3.5 hours we gave up, we just couldn't get through them. And I just wondered why all these oyster shells would be brought up by horse and buggy from Adelaide and then later by train, and then it dawned on me, we had no TV back then, did we? So the men had to use something to keep stimulated. A scrounger. Well, everyone's got a bit of a scrounge in them. Even our gardeners go down the road for a walk and come back with a piece of geranium from someone's garden or something. And if I can see a bottle from Gawler, and I try and scrounge it as a historian. Yeah, when you dig up a bottle means nothing. You just put it on the shelf and it's a bottle. But if you find out who made it, who it was made for, what it was used for, and what kind of people actually bought that bottle, then you have a historic item sitting on your shelf, something of our history of our past. So I am a historian. And down here we've got a tobacco. No, I don't think I use that word, but I'm thinking about a long day when I've been digging and you're standing on top of the hole and you're looking down and you've still got 2.5, 3 feet to fill back in, and your hand goes in your back and you say, back up, or I'll use the word ologist, but that's not the word I would use. A bottle digger, yes, I would say that I've got up between 85 and 90% of my bottles from digging. Here we have a dig, and it's the first and only time that when we went to this place we had a backhoe. You can see me scratching down in the hole for a bottle, and my mate gets sitting over there, and his wife's supervising, and somewhere out there my wife's on the camera taking the picture. Then the bottom one, we have a dog there. I'm holding a bottle with the name Roger on it that we actually dug up. Roger and Klein from a dentist and a chemist from Hay. So that, I just gave out where we're digging there then. So don't run over to pinch my spot. And I'm trying to get the dog to get the sniff of the bottle so he can go out and find some more for me, but it didn't work. Now, once you dig, you get a collection, and we have a little bit of my collection. At the top row we've got Fordings and Bitfords, and we have Gawler Chemist, then aerated waters from Gordon, third row. The next is the sauces and pickles, etc., Rosella and all that type. And then down the bottom we have a few labelled Gawler Chemist bottles and the odd bottle at the bottom. Next. Here we have some stoneware. We have a few Hall's ginger beers Apple's ginger beer there, then a few little ink bottles just behind them, and then the jars at the back. Well, they're the jars that actually shape this manly, healthy specimen you've got out in front of you now. Just imagine, I used to be able to stick my hand in one and pull out a dill cucumber, and then in another jar there'd be a heap of sauerkraut come out and the salted beans. So that's why I'm so healthy. I only have to take a blood pressure, cholesterol and a gout tablet every morning to keep going. Up the top we have the complement and oil bottles, then in the middle just a few odd-sod chemists. Down the bottom we have beers all around the back and a few other marble bottles, and the big whisky bottle in the middle is from Scotland, made in the 1880s. Down the bottom we have J-Lad, Adelaide Port and Gawler transfers, and in the bottom corner we have 4 embossed the same way. I'm a member of the Adelaide Historic Bottle Club since about 2006, and they have meetings every second Thursday in the month, and they have a display where people fetch the latest bottles they've found or bought, and then certain titles or bottles that are asked for are shown. And then after about 4 years in there, I've got enough confidence to start displaying bottles at our annual show on the long weekend every June. And here are just a few of my different displays I put up. The one in the bottom corner is of the Fotheringham family, and the next one is of just of Gawler bottles, and then the top one is my favourite 5, and unfortunately I took that one before judging, so it didn't get ruined by a blue ribbon. Bottles used by businesses of Gawler. In this presentation I will share a little about the bottles used and the history of number 101 110 Murray Street, Gawler. Part of the Wilcox building, a pharmacy and chemist shop from its completion in 1868 to when the business moved in April 2008, serving the community for 140 years. There have been many chemists resident in Gawler since the beginning in 1839, and each has a story to tell. I hope to impart some of the work that they did to make Gawler a better place. Now we have got 2 numbers for the Murray Street shop, and in the red we have that the South Australian Government passed legislation on the way street numbers ran in the 1950s, with the east side of Gawler becoming odd and the west side becoming even. So the numbers actually swapped sides in about 1955, and it makes it fairly hard for when you're doing research when you have 2 numbers. The next is how to read the descriptions as you go on. I have bottles shown further, and the height of the bottle is just written alongside, e.g. 20 mils or 15 mils, centimetres, and what's embossed on the bottles, e.g. TJ Rowe Chemist Gawler, and if there's nothing written beside the bottle, there'll be a label, and you just have to read the label to get the gist of what the bottle's all about. Base mark known from now on as BM, e.g. 00 helps to date the bottle, and then down the bottom we have all the manufacturers of South Australian bottles and the dates that they operated from. The first chemist I'm going to talk about is Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker came to South Australia in the early 1850s, opened a pharmacy business at Goringa Borough. He sold the shop and then headed off to the Victorian gold rush. Parker returned to South Australia and established a pharmacy in Gawler. Bunyip, September 1864. Mr. Parker, the chemist, has erected a neat two-storey building, the lower part of which forms a small but handsome shop. Haven't found exactly where that shop was yet, but this is the lead up to the next part of the story. And then we have a report in the South Australian Register in May 1864, report that Mr. Parker, chemist, was a witness in a court case with Alice Jordan. The chemist shop was established at this time in Murray Street. So the first date I thought was exactly when the shop was open. Now we're 5 months earlier, and if I get another chance to go through the computer and that, we might find a date that he was there even before that. And we turn over and we have the actual Adelaide Register complete coverage of the court case. Apparently Alice was charged with drunken and disorderly and a few other things. But I'll just read how the reporter reported it in the Bunyip, little bits of it. Alice Jordan went into James Parker's chemist shop and asked for 6pence worth of laudanum for her child. Shortly after, she returned and said that she had dropped the bottle and required more. Well, we know what laudanum is. It's a substance of opium, I believe, so I'm glad she dropped it before she gave it to a child. The interesting line I found was in the bottom of the paragraph. She is the wife of a man named Jordan, who is advertised to exhibit as a prize fighter at the Williston Hotel. I'm just going through my mind. I wonder if that was the first training session for the mighty Donnie Brooks. Next. And now we have the pharmaceutical chemists that were in 101, 110 Murray Street. Read them all. That'll do, I should remember them by now. Joseph Parker is the first we're going to mention. Joseph Parker moved into the Messrs. Cox new building in February 1868. He will take the third shop from Jacob Street. In the Bunyip, November 67, Messrs. Cox new building. We understand the National Bank has made arrangements for renting from Messrs. Wilcox the building at the corner of Jacob Street and Murray Street. Dr. Lewis takes the next and Mr. Parker the third. The buildings are to be completed in about 10 weeks and will be a great improvement on Murray Street. Now, I've just put in there that it was in February 1868. It could have been in January and it could have been after, but well, I think in those days if the builder said 10 weeks, it was 10 weeks. Then a bottle found in the old Parker cellar reads, you can go on to the next one now anyway, and this is the bottle that was found. H.W. Wilkinson, Medical Hall, Coringa, and the second label half missing is the KER on the bottom corner that you can get druggist Gawler on it. Just a little footnote here. Mr. Wilkinson was a chemist in Gawler in 1856 and for some time apparently after that, but that'll most probably come in another episode. Mr. Parker was running a chemist shop in King William Street in Adelaide in 1879. And down the bottom of that picture we have a whalebone toothbrush with Mr. Parker chemist, J. Parker chemist in Boston. Unfortunately all the pig hairs have rotted away, or bristles. The next chemist in the shop was Charles Cross. Charles Cross came to South Australia with his parents at the age of 9 in 1854. He pursued chemistry and became employed by Lupus Scammell, under whom he studied. Charles transferred to Fordings & Co. in Adelaide when Scammell and Fordings became partners. Cross became interested in homeopathic medicine and engaged himself with Mr. E.S. Wiggs and worked his way up to manager. After 8 years of practical experience at the Wiggs homeopathic chemist premises, he decided to start his own business and purchased an established pharmacy of Joseph Parker in Gawler, 1877. Mr. Cross studied indigestion and discovered a remedy in the shape of drops. Charles Cross South Australian indigestion drops. Its success can partly be contributed to the £1,000 spent on advertising in the first year of manufacturing. A pamphlet on indigestion and its cures was published and sold 412,000 copies. A little article in the Bunyip in November 1938, Gawler Business of early days, businesses of early days. Charles Cross, now Rose, was a manufacturing, dispensing and family chemist. He also practiced painless extraction. I guess that's where you took your money out of your pocket without you feeling it. Mr. Cross found it necessary to move to Adelaide to extend operation and continued his chemist business in King William Street, Adelaide in 1892. Now we have a few ads in the Bunyip. We have an ad here for 1877, and the little bit that apart from him explaining where he's got all his experiences from, is teeth carefully extracted. And then we go to the 1878 ad in the Bunyip, and down there we have by new method which renders the operation almost painless. Teeth are carefully extracted. I just found out his method. Here we have some of the bottles used by Charles. Up the top, on the front, we have indigestion drops, and Charles Cross and South Australia on either side. And the interesting bit I find here is dose, 25 to 30 drops in water, 3 to 4 times a day. 1, 2, I think he just poured a damn bottle in here. And the difference between the two bottles, indigestion bottles, is one's a little bit taller, but one has a base mark, 4200, which I believe is an order number from the company. And then in the middle we have a little Cross toothache essence bottle. The bottle's so small they couldn't even get the E on the ache. And here we have in the bottom corner a large bottle with Cross chemist and druggist Murray Street Gawler of cod liver oil, and it hadn't been much taken out of that, so they must have hated it as much then as they do today. The next one we have 3 blue bottles. Cross's hair restorer must be used at night, and then the sides Cross and South Australia on each side. Down the bottom in the base mark, a 00, that's a South Australian made bottle, about the early or the late 1880s, early 1890s. Down the bottom we have a Cross Restorine. On the back read accompanying pamphlet carefully, sides Cross and South Australia. And down the bottom on the base mark we have a K, that's for Coolmer Brothers manufacturers, London and England. So these bottles were English bottles. The next one we have a bottle that he would have put his medicines into the public. and it's just Charles Cross Chemist Gawler, and down the bottom we have the K, so that's an English bottle again. The South Australian Hair Preserver, a South Australian made bottle. I haven't been able to actually link that exactly to Charles, but there's been 10 or 12 of these bottles found around Gawler and not many elsewhere, so he would have been here at that time manufacturing, so I'm hoping that it is. Down the bottom just a couple of labelled bottles from out of the cellar. Here we have an advertisement featured in the Gawler Handbook of 1880, and down the bottom an article from Fremantle, Western Australia in the Herald in 1881. The exhibition, further awards. Indigestion drops. A silver medal has been awarded to Charles Cross, chemist, Gawler, South Australia, for his indigestion drops, a valuable preparation made from pure ingredients. Then we have ads for Cross's cough drops, and they've come in forms of testimonials. And on the top one in 1880, we have testimonials from Richard Hogben from Kangaroo Flat and Thomas Day from Reeves Plains, and then down the bottom 4 years later they've used the same testimonial from Thomas Day again. Here we have testimonials for Oil Lotion at the top in the Bunyip in 1880, and then in 1881 corn extraction. Here, the next. I've got a few pages to get through, so I'm flying. So, OA Chambers information for the people, published 1885, and we have testimonials for Cross's indigestion drop, and even the Governor General gets a bit of a plug down the bottom there somewhere. So he really got onto everyone for his testimonials. Here we have an ad in 1889 and for Restorine, and there's no names given here, but as we went down I thought it quite funny. He's got a lady says and a lady says and another lady says, and I just couldn't work that out until I got the next bit. Charles Cross used the country papers of South Australia to advertise the products manufactured in his Gawler business. Here are a few examples. We have one in the Narracourt Herald in 1889 and one in the Northern Argus Clare, which I will read. Restorine, Restorine. This is a special medication for married and single females. When health is delayed through wet feet and other cause, Restorine has brought on where everything else has failed. A medical gentleman says that he has known when the use of remedies have failed, Restorine to bring on what was desired. Health is necessary and must be had. Restorine will bring it on. I don't know what it's going to bring on. So, sold by all chemists, 2 and 6pence per bottle. Postage 6pence extra. Well, it was cheaper if you bought the first one, because that was 2 and 9pence posted. But then now I understand why the ladies were getting a mention in that first one, because it was directed at ladies. First of all, I just thought it was the women of Gawler were having their first say, but the ad was really directed at women. We have an ad here for Cross's rheumatic syrup in the Bunyip in the 90s. Oh, hang on, wait on. We swapped over here, didn't we? We've got a picture of Murray Street in 1890, and the chemist shop is the third window right there. Yeah. So, go on again. What have we got? Right. Important public notice. Charles Cross desires to announce to the public that owing to the great increased demand for his celebrated proprietary medicines, Indigestion Drops and Co. He has taken a large manufacturer in Gawler, where he intends carrying out the wholesale business. He is pleased to state that he has so successfully managed his business so as to be able now to devote the whole of his time to the wholesale. So he must have been really into it there. Now, I don't know where this manufacturing place was, but it didn't last very long, because he actually, in the first bit you can see where he actually had moved into King William Street and already bought another place to manufacture in 1892 in Adelaide. Just a little bit from the Western Australian Mail in Perth in 5th of March 1904. Charles Cross, a well-known chemist, died last week in Adelaide at the age of 58. So he was well known, not just in South Australia, but all over Australia. To get a little added way over in Western Australia of his passing shows that his way of selling things by advertising must have worked, and he had a real good business going. Now we move on to James Rowe. Now, James Rowe was the son of Henry Rowe, born in Gawler in 1867. At the age of 14, started employment under Charles Cross, with whom he learned his profession as chemist. In 1891, he purchased the pharmacy from Mr. Cross. In 1919, Mr. Arthur Rose, the youngest son of Henry Rowe, took over the business from his brother James. Now we have an article in April 1891, change of businesses. James Cross has purchased the retail business of Mr. Charles Cross, and Mr. Cross disposes of the retail business of James Rowe in the paragraph underneath. Next. We have two beautiful labelled bottles that were found in the cellar. Beautiful old labels. One's got Murray Street and the other one's just a pharmaceutical chemist Gawler on the bottom. But two wonderful historic bottles. Now we have two poison bottles up the top. TJ Rowe Gawler Poisons, glass made in America. Then on the other side we have two of these dispensing bottles where TJ Rowe Chemist Gawler, and of course the glass made in America written on the front. Down the bottom we have a dental surgery book, and inside signed by James Rowe, January 1891. Bottom just above the name we have in big letters Night Bell. We didn't have it in the chemist when I was going there. And down the bottom we just have a little ad for Rowe's sanitary lotion for the nursery. That would have been one of these Rowe's own products at that time. Then if we turn over at the next page, we've got Rowe started making his own products. We have Rowe's Wild Cherry Coffee Elixir, Rowe's Rheumatic Liniment, Rowe's Eucalyptus Oil, which he got from Kangaroo Island, so he would have been buying that over in bulk and doing it, bottling it himself. Worm, Rowe's Worm Syrup, and then across in the corner in a 1918 ad, we have Good Red Blood. Prevent pimples, blotches, boils and co. Rowe's extract of sarsaparilla. I should be alright because I drank a lot of that early in my years. Now the ad that interests me is this Solomon solution. Note we have a man, horse, cow and dog, and this solution cures man from rheumatics, horses from sores and strains, cows from ulcerated udders, and dogs from Maine. Gawler, J.T. Rowe, chemist. You didn't use any of that, Bruce, did you? Because I wouldn't mind a bit if you've got any left in your shelf. An ad in the September '94 paper, then down the bottom we have an etched medicine glass, T.J. Rowe, chemist Gawler. There is also an embossed one, but they are extremely hard to get. Just another couple of ads from the Bunyip, one in '05, Rose Shaw corn cures, and one down the bottom in 1913 for Rose syrup of tar and wild cherry. Now, Rowe has sold Dr. Sheldon's products with advertisements regularly in the Bunyip. Well, we have advertisements here in 05, 06 and 07, and I think we could have got an ad for every week in that period and even a little bit longer than that. So they really spent money on advertising, and the bottles, the two at the top, Dr. Sheldon's New Discovery with Sydney, New South Wales and Boston, USA on the sides, and the one down the bottom is Dr. Sheldon's Magnetic Liniment and Sydney and Boston on the sides. Here we have an ad in the history of Gawler, 1837 to 1908, and down the bottom, James Rowe, former Gawler chemist, has suddenly died suddenly at Glenelg on Tuesday, aged 83 years. He had enjoyed good health up to the time of his passing. The late Mr. Rowe was the original proprietor of Rowe's Pharmacy, which he conducted from the age of 21 years until 1919, when he retired and sold the business to his brother, the late Arthur Rowe, July 1950. Here we have a guy at 21 years of age, came into a chemist shop as a druggist, a chemist and a tooth puller. So that was remarkable. I think now they only get out of the studies at about 23 or 24. Next we have Mr. Arthur Rowe was born in Gawler, the youngest son of Mr. Henry Rowe. Arthur entered business life under the direction of his elder brother James as a chemist assistant. He gained his pharmaceutical degree in 1910. Mr. Rowe gave service in the AAMC, which is the Australian Army Medical Corps, in the 1914-18 war. He served a greater part of his soldiering in the humid heat of India. Mr. Rowe returned with health impaired, but careful nursing and attention appeared to overcome the disabilities. He took over the pharmacy business from his brother James Rowe in 1919. He married Marjorie Rose Best at St. Peter's College on the 27th of October 1926. Mr. Rowe ran the pharmacy until his death in August 1944. His widow, Marjorie Rowe, took over as proprietor of the pharmacy. In this time, Mrs. Rowe brought in managing chemist for the Rowe Pharmacy. Here we have two more beautiful labelled bottles in the cellar of Arthur Rowe. The top ones was for celery seed. I don't know if he fed that to his canaries or what. On the next one then. Here we have a couple of Arthur C. Rowe's MPS Chemist Murray Street Gawler bottles. The only difference here is on the base mark one has the order number and the other one hasn't, and then the other 4 are just ordinary plain labelled bottles. On the next page we have another 3 just labelled bottles. If you were into chemistry and that, you'd be able to study what they were actually using and what was in there, but that's a bit beyond me. Just being digging bottles is enough. The next we have homeopathic remedies with brief description of complaints, common complaints. As you can see, there's everything that you mentioned, study is mentioned there. And if you turn over, the next one rather is on the back of the pamphlet. Just go on and on. There's nothing he couldn't cure. Now we have a picture of Arthur Rose, or Murray Street with Arthur Rose, chemist there next to the Marchant studio. We know it's before 1933 because the tracks are still uncovered, the tram tracks. Anyone work out what years the cars are? 28, 29 or earlier? A bit earlier. 26. Get you to state which car says that. Next. Here we have a Rose concentrated water glass for serving eggs. Fresh eggs in winter at spring and summer prices and the directions. And here we have an old mouthwash label, and down the bottom a Rose hair, nursery hair lotion. Here we note that they must be buying more products in instead of manufacturing them, and he has labels on the bottles and the box in the middle. I'm trying to read what's on it. It's a bit blurred and washed out, but I think he only sold that product to people that had piles of problems. A stamp on the salts wrapper around the bottle stating it's Rose shop, so I'm starting to buy nearly everything in at that time. Now I'm going to run through another lot of ads, but at this time there was a bit of competition down the street, and there was ads in the Bunyip every week. The guy that was causing the strife was a chemist by the name of Mr. Payne. In the March 35, an ad on here, tonic, March 35 again, Rose APC tablets, 15 cures there for a bob a bottle, not bad. And then we go on to May 35, and we have Rose influenza mix.
Dandelion fever.
July 35.
Dandelion fever.
Cold nights and warm beds. Sorry, he's only selling hot water bottles, fellas. Then in July 35, the amazing white pine with tar. And then again in 36 we have a hair tonic. In 1939 we have a fella that he feels no ill because he's taking Rose syrup, tar and wild cherry. And the other fella, well, he looks like he's on death's bed, so I hope he gets some of Rose influenza mix into him. And then in 1940 we have added for hot water bottle, and there's that guy, still looks like death's bed. Either the influenza mix is no good or he couldn't afford to buy it. Then we have in December 1940 ads to Christmas presents. In 1942 he's using the Australian troops in one ad, and this little fella leaning over the guy in bed, Rose anti-mosquito drops. Fairly important, I think. And here in December 1944 we have Rose Pharmacy, but it's also become a national service chemist for our soldiers returning from the war. But you'll notice that, in pre-notes, that Arthur actually died in August 44, so Marjorie Rowe is running the shop now, but Arthur is still advertised as chemist there. Go on again, please. F.L. Bowen was manager of the Rose Pharmacy from 1945 to 46, and here we have a Rose Oil Lotion, and we have Bowen manager written on the label. It was just lucky that we found that the label was coming loose, and I went to glue it on and it came straight off, and we found that underneath. The next we have an ad in the July Bunyip in 1945, and we notice here that it's changed to Rose Pharmacy now. It's no longer Arthur as the chemist, and we have Bowen manager, and his private address, the Prince Albert Hotel. J.W. Watts was the managing pharmacy from 46 to 48, and here we have the Oil Lotion again with his label on the bottom. And if we go to the next one, we have the ad in the Bunyip in May 46, and down in the bottom we have J. Watts as the manager. After hours, 12 Gawler Terrace. That must be down by Deadman's Pass, is it? There's something Gawler Terrace?
There isn't a 12 Gawler Terrace. They're all odd numbers.
They're odd numbers. This was before the street.
50-day change.
We were 13.
So the next chemist we have is Mr. J.G. Cox, moved into Gawler in 1948. He was in the Gladstone Pharmacy from 41, 42, and I'm not sure where he went, if he was still there until he moved to Gawler or not. And then we have an ad in the paper, and he's also still a National Services chemist, and he's wishing everyone seasonal greetings to all. Now we have pictures of just labelled bottles with Cox on them, and go over to the next one. We have a lot more here. Even methylated spirits bottles. Then we go on to the next one. It's exactly the same, more labelled bottles of John Cox. Now we go on to the next chemist. We have J.G. Cox, F.E. Walls. Cox and Walls formed a partnership in and anyone help me? Does anyone know when? Well, we know it must have been in 19 something. At the bottom we have two labelled bottles. We have Cox Pharmacy, but underneath that we have Cox and Wall written on the label. Then we go to Graham Townsend. Townsend brought the business in 1979. Graham was a pharmacist in several Adelaide areas before moving to Gawler. And we have three labelled bottles down the bottom from Graham. And then we go to Kim Popker. Kim's first job was at Callahan's Pharmacy, 141 Murray Street, Gawler, in 1976 as a trainee. In 1983 he worked for Norm Russell at Elizabeth South. Then in 1986 Kim purchased the pharmacy in 110 Murray Street, Gawler, from Graham Townsend. And here we have a few pictures of bottles. We have the two bottles together. One had the old label on it, and then Kim must have recycled them and stuck his on the back. And then down the bottom we have a Kim Popker's decongestant cough mixture. I believe that was used by the Sims family. Somehow it got left in the cupboard and then it was around when I started collecting bottles. Then we have Kim Potka and Phil Richardson. Phil's started work as a trainee pharmacist in 1993 at Kim Potka's Pharmacy, Gawler, then at Potka's Pharmacy at Salisbury in 1997. Kim and Phil formed a partnership in 2001. In 2007, Phil returned to Gawler after the Salisbury shop was sold. The Potka and Richardson partnership moved to 114 Murray Street, Gawler in April 2008, ending 140 years of pharmacy in 110 Murray Street. We'll go back to number one. Yeah. We can go up to it. Yeah. I'm Roger Sims, and thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found it interesting.